Hello everyone. I just finished watching the Avicii documentary, and it's just been released on Netflix. And I'm noticing how it's obviously hitting a nerve in the world. There's a lot of social media talk about it. I want to reflect a little bit on it because it's obviously a very important topic. There's currently a general mental health pandemic, one could call it. And especially there's a rise in awareness about mental health among men. There are a lot of quite frightening statistics about the mental health of men at the moment. And it's something that's kind of still budding. I've been listening to some people who are really started some research on it and to shed more light on it and create more understanding, which is great. But it's really in its early stages. And at this point also, it's also about society realizing that there is a problem, but unfortunately there's still more understanding to come. So at this point it must seem quite confusing, and especially the story of Avicii, which is almost like an archetypical story of a fallen hero, which is incredibly heartbreaking. Someone who took his life at the prime, at an absolute prime. He had a life that we all think we would aspire to. Talent, success, and the world acknowledging all that. But still, it didn't seem enough to him. And but it is unfortunately something that's been reflected in other situations. Like we can see some other famous artists like Meinhardt and many other amazing artists who, interesting enough, also in a similar life stage around age 27, 20 to 29, which some astrology talks about, being the Saturn return, which also kind of is mirrored in the psychological developmental stages. So in a way it's great that it's, he's now in a way helping people become aware of such mental health issues and how not to chase that hollow success. I believe he already mentioned something in that direction throughout the documentary. He had little sound bites about what he was struggling with, and so it sounds like it came to a tragic ending. The reason why I want to talk about this is because I've been, I'm a mental health practitioner. I'm a counselor. I am incredibly passionate about mental health. It's like I can't drop the topic at the moment. So I've been wanting to say a few words about it that could explain his struggles. Well, first of all, he has this classic arc of like rising to success at an early age, getting to a point beyond anybody's imagination, and so thinking, ticking all the boxes of what should be success. Underneath all that, there is Tim, the one he keeps talking about. He just says, "Who am I? I'm Tim." It's very humbling comment, and it also kind of, me being half Swedish, I can kind of understand where he's coming from. I grew up, I was born in that little five block radius that he's talking about in Stockholm. I was born there, and I'm also planning to return there soon. And so I understand that very humble Swedish philosophy. The Swedes are very lagom, as they call it, which means just right. They don't aspire usually to big highs of success and affluence. So he reached that point of content very early on in his career, where he was, like he said himself, where he could afford catching a cab or buying a meal whenever he wanted to, and so on and so forth. And that was kind of his peak. Anything far beyond that was, to him, as far as I understand, all about his creativity and what is possible and how far he can reach in expanding his like gift, and how far he can take the gift. So he took the gift for as far as he could. But in the meantime, because it was kind of out of balance, he destroyed his body in the meantime on that path. So he, thanks to his understanding, his family support, etc., etc., he realized that, you know, he wasn't going anywhere with that, so he withdrew. He recovered what appeared as recovered, or he worked on his recovery. But then, as he felt strong again and he bounced back, or what his family and friends describe in the documentary as bouncing back, and he was starting to rev up into a new phase, something wasn't right anymore, or something just hadn't hit the note yet. So it leaves the whole public watching his documentary wondering what happened. And it's at first sight not apparent, especially if one doesn't really understand clearly all the dynamics that goes into mental health and how to stay healthy, and what creates motivation, what creates aspiration, what creates a personal sense of success rather than an outwardly sense of success. There's so many cues in that documentary that shows in the direction where Tim was at. First of all, he's very, in a way, supportive upbringing, safe upbringing. So he had a certain mental stability and outward stability that, you know, Sweden provided in his earlier years, and also like with his parents and family, etc., etc. So it had a really good, stable life in the early days, and then he rose into an area, a part of life and the world which was quite alien to that. He navigated it well because he had a good foundation, until he didn't, and that's when he then started free falling in a way. I sometimes wonder how he would have done, because when I listen, for example, to the documentary of Robert Williams, he has a similar journey, and he talked about how in some of the turning points he had Elton John step in and help him with rehab, and so on and so forth. So Elton John, who knows what Elton John told him, because Elton John must recognize in Robert Williams what he was going through, and vice versa. And so I was wondering sometimes, how would have Avicii felt if he had met someone, a peer, an actual peer of the same or similar size of stardom and early success, and so someone like Robin Williams or someone like Elton John, someone of that caliber. What would have happened if one of them would have taken him under their wing and gone, you know what, this is, you know, just seen it and intervened more than he had tons of intervention. I'm not saying that. He had all his family and friends around him, and but like actually having someone, a peer into him, I wonder what that would have brought. And because I think that he would have had to see like a future self. I think there was possibly a lack of a completely shifted future self where he could really see what could be in store for him in the future. Him restarting his career was maybe felt to him like more of the same, and just it's going to just be like reheated souffle, like just staying on a similar track, slight different. They talk about it. He seemed more mature, and but it wasn't obviously, like, it didn't seem cooked enough, and he didn't have that real, like, almost like what they talk about sometimes, a quantum leap of identifying himself with a whole new set of motivation that will kind of set him apart from his past, because I can imagine someone being that creative and it all being about creativity. As they often say, he's very sensitive. He doesn't have the same shield that some people might think with such level of success. So he would have needed a complete paradigm shift, or like an aspiration, or see a spark of a complete shift of a goal, but not just doing the same, similar, related aspiration, but knowing that he will never be able to beat his past experience, because he knows if he goes there, he's going to just burn out again. So I can see how he would have had that, he would have gotten spun out and lost a certain meaning in life, and that's just unfortunate that didn't happen, and that is just, it's a matter of grace, luck, whatever you want to call it. So he then plummeted into that dark hole, which many of us probably know, and knowing how high he was high up in his success, one can understand how far one can fall. It's, in life, in the world of polarity, as one would call it, it can go pretty deep. Also, he must have had, a lot of unresolved ideas that were still unclear to him, and it would have sent him down a really dark path. It's fully understandable. For some reason, he didn't get that grace, that spark, that intervention, that particular thing that hit the spot. One can interpret all sorts of philosophies or concepts on that. That's just what happened. It's nobody's fault. It sounds like everybody did what they could do. He was given a lot. It was just one little thing that maybe just didn't hit the spot for him, that to give him that new blossoming and that new sprite of a spriteful experience, which would have probably required a bigger shift or a bigger meeting of the path. Someone maybe much more closer to his experience. So I understand if it creates a lot of confusion. It's probably good that it creates confusion, because he's like the epitome of what mainstream thinks is success, and the fact that wasn't enough is, yet again, even though you keep hearing famous people who reached similar levels saying success doesn't bring happiness, riches don't bring happiness, we keep hearing it over and over again. We have people like Jim Carrey talking about it, and so on and so forth. Jim Carrey went down the path of TM, transcendental meditation. Avicii went down that path as well. Yet it didn't seem to be enough. So, Avicii was at a very tender age, literally. It's quite tender. If you look at also brain development, and where he was at, it would have needed possibly a little bit more, and it just so happens that it was too little, too late. But it can maybe give people a chance to reflect on this, and maybe give that next person who watches this documentary a chance to see beyond the point that he got to. So maybe he can be like a token of light for any person who watches documentary and can start a conversation, reflect on it, see what happened. How, many of us spend too much time aspiring to exactly where he got to, and then see what can happen if it doesn't if it doesn't shift something in you, or meet a certain part of you that is more true to your understanding of fulfillment. So he talks about feeling content. How can we reach that contentment, and how can we start healing some of the mental health that is happening around us? And so let him be a beacon of light and understanding, and help us heal what is sadly, tragically, become such a big part of our world. So let's start the conversation. Let's start thinking about what happened to Avicii, or what happened to Tim.